Hello, my name is Caitlin, and this is a video that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. I have been collecting podcasts for quite some time, like many years, probably like 10 years or something crazy. So I have quite a collection of podcasts that I love and adore, and I'm always looking for more. So I talk about them quite often, either on stream or on Instagram, and I figured I haven't done anything regarding podcasts for YouTube. So here we are. And because I learned so much from all of you, please, if you have any other podcasts that you love and adore the same way as I love and adore these podcasts, then do leave them in the comments below because I would love to check out some new ones. Not that I have any more hours in my day to fill it with podcasts, but regardless, I would still be very happy to add new ones to my love and adored list. The thing I like about podcasts, and this goes for audiobooks too, I feel like it fills the silences while you're doing other things. If you're cleaning your house, if you're driving in your car or in a commute, one of the two. If you are in the bathroom, in the shower, getting ready, doing a whole laundry list of boring tasks that could be filled with wonderful, educational, entertaining words of wisdom, we have podcasts. Now, I know a lot of people fill that silence with music, and that's awesome too. I too sometimes swap it out and do music instead. So there's a time and place for that. I truly believe that. I definitely feel like I have scaled back a bit on the music and done more podcasts, especially the past few years, where I'm just like, I feel like I don't know what I'm gathering all this information for. It's like I'm preparing for hibernation or something, who knows, but I feel like I'm always just scavenging for everything that can make me more efficient, more knowledgeable, more tolerant of the sounds of Los Angeles. Anyway, I think podcasts are absolutely wonderful, so I'm going to share my favorites with all of you. Now, also I want to mention, this is not my entire list of podcasts. I have probably over 100 of podcasts in the app that I use for a podcast, so this is definitely not all of them. These are just my favorites that are like my go-to. Also, I will touch on briefly what app I use because I do think it's a fantastic app. I know a lot of people use like the default apps, like if you're on an iPhone, you'll use the podcast app, and that's fine, but I found this specific app to be a tad bit better, and I absolutely adore it. I've used the word adore a lot. I don't know why. So I might as well just jump into what I use. So I use an app called Overcast, and I do pay for the premium version so I don't have to worry about ads or anything extra. It's a fabulous app, and I think it's actually created by one guy, which is also amazing, and he's always updating it and making it better and listening to people's feedback. So I highly value apps that are created this way, that are still updated. The thing I love most about this app too is that there's a thing called Smart Speed. So a lot of podcast apps will allow you to listen to a podcast at a faster speed, which I think I usually do like 1.5 or 1.75 depending on the podcast itself and the content and the person speaking and all of that. But in addition to that, Overcast has this thing called Smart Speed, where what it does, it actually removes the silences in the podcast. So if there's like, a couple seconds of a break where a guest is thinking, it will remove those to make the podcast shorter and more efficient, which is mind-blowing and amazing because you don't ever notice it, but it has saved me 115 hours. 115 hours beyond speed adjustments alone is how much Smart Speed has saved me over the course of using Overcast. Now, I have used it for many years, so that is over the course of many years, but I think that's absolutely fantabulous. A genius, right? Also, no, this isn't sponsored or anything. I just absolutely love this, and you guys know I like to share what I love. But just because I know there's gonna be that one person that sounds like you're sponsored and that's why you make this video, no, trust me. Nobody is paying me to make this video. So I know other podcast apps allow this as well, but I also do playlists. So I'll have certain playlists depending on certain events. Like I'll have a playlist that I do for the morning, and it is all of my daily podcasts that I want to listen to first thing in the morning. Those are generally like my news podcast, my economics podcast, things that are released daily and I want to keep up on. So I have playlists morning, and then I'll also have like a security playlist, IT, but then I also do an all-encompassing playlist where it has all of the podcasts that I have ever listened to or like downloaded into the app. I have them all added to the playlist, but it's organized by episode by date, which is fantastic because if there's ever a podcast that maybe like goes on break for a little bit, or sometimes they take a year off, or sometimes they're based on seasons and so they'll only upload like 2 months out of the year, something like that. When I have it in this playlist where it's all episodes of all of my podcasts organized by date, I can see like all the new podcasts out today, regardless of the category, the content, all of that. It just keeps it all current, which actually has saved me a lot because I got so overwhelmed with the number of podcasts that I have that you start to forget some of your favorites, and then you realize like a year later, oh my goodness, I haven't listened to this entire podcast all year. So I don't like doing that, and having a playlist like that definitely helps. So I'm going to do this kind of like how I did with my books video. I'm going to do this by categories or genres, just so that there's some sort of organization in here. The first 3 categories I'm going to talk about are probably ones that you all would be interested in, and those are my tech podcasts, my IT podcasts, and security podcasts. The other 3 categories are probably ones, or maybe ones that you'd be interested in too, but these are actually a little bit heftier. I feel like there's just a lot more people in these categories, so just keep that in mind. So these 3 categories are my news, business, economics, current events, podcasts, then I have science group, and then I have my thinkers group, which is kind of like etc. It's all the people that like have conversations or interviews with other people. Maybe they're businessy podcasts, but I've kind of grouped them all into the thinkers. Now, so that I don't have another 30-minute long video like my last video, I'm not going to go into these too in depth. I'm just going to tell you why I like them. And these are in no order whatsoever, by the way. So the first one in my tech category is the A16Z podcast. This is put on by a venture capital firm out of Silicon Valley. It's very tech related. They talk about trends and things in the news, tech related, advancements. It's awesome. I love it. It's very well produced. Number 2 in the tech category is the very famous Gimlet Radio's Reply All. I don't know if this is really tech related. They do a lot of tech talk, so I'm going to put it in the tech category, but this is one of the most hilarious, also heartwarming, exceptionally produced, just all together very, very well done podcast that I recommend to almost everyone. Next up in the tech categories for all of my computer hardware people fam, it is the PC Perspective podcast, and it used to be one of my favorites. I've kind of gotten away from it as a regular basis. I'll still listen to it if there's a topic that I'm interested in, but it is one of my go-tos for anything hardware related or when there's a release coming out. Next up is the AI, Artificial Intelligence podcast with Lex Fridman. This is a great podcast. He has a lot of interesting people on the podcast. He's had discussions with Elon Musk that have been really interesting, and I'm actually really excited to see where he takes this podcast. And the last 2 in my tech category are actually newer ones that I've recently discovered. The first one is the Big Tech podcast. This is an amazing podcast. I love this podcast mostly because it deals with a lot of data privacy. You guys know that I'm really big on data privacy and data legislation, and this is exactly what they talk about. And then the last in my tech category is a podcast put on by Recode, and that is Pivot with Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. This is a new one that I've recently discovered. They release twice a week, and I just kind of like their banter. I like the things they talk about. They also talk about big tech and legislation and data and pretty much any of the hot topics in tech and just kind of current events. As far as IT, I have 2 in this category that I highly recommend. There are probably others that I may not not be familiar with, or maybe I stopped listening to, but the two that I do recommend are the IT Career Energizer podcast, which is very, very good because I feel like he talks to people in normal, everyday positions, if that makes sense. And it's just like, it's nice to hear people that are probably in your shoes too. The other one is Heavy Networking, and it is exactly about what you think it is. It's about networking and a lot of innovation around networking. I kind of steered away from that one a little bit, but I still recommend it. So as far as security, this is another category that I'm sure there are many other podcasts out there. I'm sure there are actually a ton of podcasts out there regarding with regards to security right now. But these are the three that I recommend and listen to regularly. The first one is Cyber, and it's put on by Motherboard. I feel like because it is put on Motherboard, I do have criticisms about Motherboard itself. They're not always great, but I will say that because it's put on by Motherboard, I think they have a higher budget and can do more. They have more production. The next one that I really recommend is Threatless, and that is put on by Shannon Morris. This is just a great podcast. You know, everyone knows her from Hack 5. She's fabulous, and I really, really enjoy listening to this podcast. It's short, it's sweet, to the point, and it gets all the information I need. And then the last one in my security category is Darknet Diaries, and I've actually learned about it from all of you. A lot of people suggested I start listening to it, and boy, you could not have steered me in a better direction. This is a freaking fabulous podcast. Now jumping into my non-tech specific categories, I'll do my economics, business, current events, news, those podcasts first. So in the morning, I always listen to 3 specific podcasts, and that is Up First, The Daily, and Marketplace. Those are like my 3. I always listen to them on my first walk with Sassy. Usually I can get through all 3 of them. And then 3 others I really enjoy in this category: Planet Money, Freakonomics, which is put on by Stephen Dubner. And then the last is Startup. It's also put on by Gimlet Studios? No, I forget. Gimlet. The same people that do Reply All, they do Startup, and Startup is a great one that interviews and talks to people who have created businesses. Then in my next category, Science, I have 3 podcasts in there. One is Science Friday, Sci Friday, and then the other 2 science ones are Star Talk, which is hilarious and awesome, and man, that it's just a good all-time, like all-around show where, you know, there's humor. I found myself laughing while I'm like walking my dog and stuff. And then the other podcast in the science category is Sean Carroll's Mindscape. I love what Sean Carroll can put on. He's a physicist, and he has a lot of books about physics, things like the many worlds theory. He talks a lot about quantum mechanics, and these are topics that I really enjoy talking or listening to or learning about, but I don't know much. And I have like a lot of his books, and I haven't finished a single one of them, so baby steps. But his podcast is fabulous, and he has some really cool guests. Like, I think recently he had Grimes, which was a really weird episode, but it's cool that he had her nonetheless. And then in my last category, and we'll wrap this up, this is the Thinkers category. So, of course, can't mention the Thinkers category without Tim Ferriss, someone who's been making podcasts for a very, 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 very long time, and even has books based on some of the guests that he had on his show. He asks some really good questions. He goes deep, and he likes to find out their strategies, their routines, and kind of a lot of questions that aren't normally asked in interviews. So I really like that aspect of his podcast. And then the other one, can't go through this category without mentioning, is the Joe Rogan podcast. This is another one that I definitely pick and choose based on the guests. I don't listen to his MMA podcast or every single one. A lot of the times his podcasts go into the 2 to 3 hour marks, and man, sometimes those just stretch over days of listening to them. Some of them are freaking fantastic, and some of them, you know, not so much. He's had some really good guests. You know, you don't always agree with people like Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro. I don't want to start throwing names out and causing any chaos in the comments, so I like to call them interesting people, and so that's cool. The only thing I don't like is that I feel like Joe Rogan has started this trend of having longer episodes or like longer podcasts. And so other podcasters are starting to go down this route as well. People like Jocko with our 3-hour podcast. I'm sorry, I don't have that amount of time. I'm sure there are other people out there that do find value in the really, really long ones. Another great one that's actually put on by a YouTuber, and that is The Creative Life by Sarah Dietschy. This is an awesome one that I feel like she's still building up, but has some cool guests on there, other YouTubers, and just talking about their creative life and all their endeavors, how they get started on YouTube and go down the path and their experiences and all that. The next podcast in the Thinkers category is Akimbo, put on by Seth Godin, who's a very famous author. His podcast is very, very well done. I just feel like the audio is crisp, the content is crisp. He just narrates really well. I don't know, everything about it is fantastic, and the topics are really interesting. It's about how to change, like how our culture can change, and so I feel like it's very unique. Also, I think it's a newer one, maybe in the past few years, but highly recommend. Then a podcast that I have kind of strayed away from, but some of the older episodes I recommend, and he may pick up speed, and is the Making Sense podcast by Sam Harris. Sam Harris is one of the Four Horsemen, famous for his discussions with Hitchens and Dennett and Dawkins, and so Sam Harris is one of them. I feel like I don't know what has happened. I don't know if it's me or if it's him or the podcast or what, but I've kind of strayed away from it. However, some of the older episodes, like I said, are pretty good. Are actually not pretty good. They're fantastic. We're reaching the end, I promise. Only a few more. The next one is The Knowledge Project, that's put on by Shane Parrish. The Knowledge Project is super awesome. They have an accompanying website, which is also awesome, and a newsletter that comes out every Sunday called Brain Food that I highly recommend. I get a lot of my book recommendations and articles and things to talk about or think about from the newsletter that they put out every Sunday, and the podcast is also awesome. And then the last two podcasts in my Thinkers category, one that is probably one of the very first podcasts that I've ever listened to, probably actually before it was even a podcast, and that is This American Life. And I love This American Life so much. It has a special place in my heart, and I don't know, there's nothing I can say. If you haven't listened to This American Life, it's just touching stories of lives of Americans, and it's just very well done and really enjoyable. There have been many a times where I have been crying in my car or walking because of This American Life. True story. And then the last and final one, I cannot have a podcast list without mentioning Bill Simmons. Bill Simmons has been around for quite some time. I remember him from when he was the Boston sports guy, and I have followed him across his entire career. So I don't listen to him too often. Sometimes podcasts can get a little long, but I kind of love to catch up. I love it when he does his football picks with his cousin Sal. I just think he's hilarious and enjoyable. He also talks about like a lot of current events and things in like TVs and movies and things. It's just like fun to hear somebody who's into sports but also into other things as well. Can kind of combine it all. So the Bill Simmons podcast is my last and final podcast in the list. Whew. I'm telling you, there's too much content out there. I don't know how are we supposed to handle all of this? It's also good too. It's not fair. It is not fair. And here I am putting out more. I'm putting out content about content. Go figure. This is fairly meta, I suppose. Anyway, if you have any podcasts that you love and adore as much as the ones that I've listed in this video, then please do put them in the comments below. Like I said, I love learning about other podcasts and what people are listening to, and would love to check some more out, add some more to my list. And maybe we'll do a part 2, a podcast suggested by commenters. But until then, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, then give it a like. If you want to see more videos from me, then do subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching this video. I love you all very, very much. All my social links are in the description box below, including all of the links to all of the podcasts that I listed here in this video. I hope you have a fantastic day.